The World Economic Forum is godless to its black-hearted core. They want to be the ones to tell you what your rights are and aren't. Klaus Schwab has been, for 54 years, the sole chairman and founder of the World Economic Forum. But what has happened is that Schwab has become something of an embarrassment. The big power brokers behind the scenes at the World Economic Forum, they're ready for him to move on. They wanted to get rid of him. Now the World Economic Forum has announced two co-chairmen. Who are they? Andre Hoffman and Larry Fink. This week, our focus is more on Larry Fink. Who is he? He co-founded BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, managing roughly $11 trillion. He can leverage money that's enough to buy up every American billionaire. Anytime you see BlackRock, you should be concerned that there's some nefarious activity going on, because they are nefarious. They're extremely dangerous people. I've asked the question, are they evil? And I said, yes, they are, but not the way you might think of them as evil. And it's because welcome to another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton. And today we are talking about a subject, an organization that is something of a real focus for me. It's an area of special interest and expertise, and that's the World Economic Forum. And the reason we're talking about the World Economic Forum today is because Klaus Schwab has resigned, as I reported on earlier episodes of Ideas Have Consequences. But now the World Economic Forum has named two co-chairs to replace him. And I think this is significant and it's important. Exactly what it portends, we'll have to wait and see, but I think we have some indications as to what that might mean. Now, let me say a couple of things regarding the World Economic Forum that might be useful to you. Sometimes people drop into the comments of an Ideas Have Consequences episode and say, begin to tell me, you should do an episode, say, on Bill Gates, or you should do an episode on Klaus Schwab or something like that. If you look at the inventory of Ideas Have Consequences episodes, you'll see that a lot of what I don't say today about the World Economic Forum, I have covered elsewhere. And that's because each year I go to the World Economic Forum and I sneak into some of their meetings, and those places that I can't get into doesn't matter, because I can go and sit at coffee shops and, kind of eavesdrop in hotel lobbies and these kind of places where the actual, meaningful conversations really take place. And that's because I think the World Economic Forum, why would I go? Why would I bother? I think the World Economic Forum is, it's important for us to understand. It's important for us to understand who they are. It's important for us to understand what they're about, because of their massive, their gargantuan, their megalomaniacal global ambitions. And the World Economic Forum, or WEFers, as they're called, they call themselves, WEFers. WEFers have massive ambitions. And this is one of the things that sets them apart from just ordinary people. And members of the posse, people who listen to this show regularly, will know that I refer to the World Economic Forum, just a way of thinking about the World Economic Forum. I refer to it as the HOA from hell. Now, if you're not familiar with that nomenclature, it's American parlance for Homeowners Association. And anybody who has a homeowners association will tell you that most of the time they become petty, overly involved in decision-making, and they like to make their presence felt all the time. Now, the purpose, again, if you don't know what an HOA is, the purpose of an HOA on the surface of it can be very useful. It can be, people are paying dues to their HOA, and where the HOA, is taking care of things like, say, trash removal, or making sure that there's some kind of security in your neighborhood. And part of the idea is also to create a cooperative where there's some kind of shared responsibility for things that people generally agree should be done. And it's also to prevent maybe something happening to hurt your collective property values. So you have let's say you're a guy who has a $500,000 home. You don't want somebody building a chicken house, right next to you. And an HOA can be very helpful in that regard. But what inevitably happens with HOAs, most of them, is that HOAs, if you have 100 members of your HOA, 100, say, households in your HOA, and 5 of them represent your radical leftists, those are going to be the people who end up in charge. And you may say, why? Is it because they're smarter? Well, I think it's the way they see themselves, because they're elitists. And as I've pointed out on this show, we don't call them elites. People keep referring to them as elites. That's a compliment to them. That's the way they see themselves. They're not elites. They're not actually better than other people. They think they're better than other people. And therein lies the difference. And it's important that you understand this. But the reason these people end up in charge is because, as I like to put it, your average conservative, and by that I don't mean somebody who's registered as a Republican per se, I just mean has kind of a conservative mentality. The conservative mentality tends to be a live and let live mentality. You do what you want. What I'm not peeking in your windows. You do what you want. Just stay out of my lane. It shouldn't be something that spills over on me and affects me in a negative way. That mentality looks something like this. The average conservative gets up in the morning, punches the coffee maker, and begins to think about their day. The average leftist gets up in the morning, they hit the coffee maker, and they begin to think about your day too. That's the way these kinds of people think. It's the way HOAs tend to be. They can't stand the idea that someone somewhere might be happy, might be doing something that they don't approve of. And it's usually politically that they don't approve of. It may express itself in other ways. That's what the World Economic Forum is. It's just the easiest way for you to think of them. They are a global, or want to be. Their ambition is to be a global HOA that tells you how you can live. They want to be the ones to tell you what your rights are and aren't. And that brings me to something that I think ties in here quite nicely. I want you to watch what Virginia Senator Tim Kaine says in this particular remark.
The notion that rights don't come from laws and don't come from the government, but come from the creator, that's what the Iranian government believes. It's a theocratic regime that bases its rule on Shia law and targets Sunnis, Baha'is, Jews, Christians, and other religious minorities. And they do it because they believe that they understand what natural rights are from their creator. So the statement that our rights do not come from our laws or our governments is extremely troubling.
So Tim Kaine, he's not a part of the World Economic Forum. At least, I mean, he's probably been. He may even be a member. But what I mean is he's not part of their governing body or their leadership. But what he's articulated right there is shocking. It's not shocking to us that he believes it. Of course he does. He's very, very leftist in his thinking and in his mentality. But what he just articulated there fascinates me, because on another show that I do with my good friend Lawrence Fox, Laza and I were talking about, in that show, also found on my channel, Ideas Have Consequences, Larry, Alex Taunton. That show is called WTF, World of Taunton and Fox. You will note that there is no question mark at the end of that WTF. So get your dirty minds out of the gutter. It means World of Taunton and Fox. Anything else you're coming up with, you made up, and that's on you. But in an earlier episode, maybe one we did just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about, or rather I was explaining what is encoded into our founding documents, specifically the Declaration of Independence. And that is this: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, that statement right there, what Tim Kaine articulates there is he's saying it's shocking to him. He's a U.S. Senator, ladies and gentlemen. He's shocked that someone believes that their rights come from God. Senator Kaine, how in the world did you become a senator? How in the world could you possibly be so poorly educated as to not understand the very foundations of the government that you're supposed to represent? Because you see, our government was founded on the idea, and by the way, an old professor of mine, very famous American historian who guided my thesis, he was Forrest McDonald, the late Forrest McDonald. The New York Times obituary on McDonald is hilarious to me, but that's another thing. McDonald was a conservative, one of the few that I had. He used to write for, National Review and others. But McDonald always drove this into us, that we needed to understand that your rights come to you from God, and that government only recognizes those rights. That's all government can do. Rights are not bestowed upon you by government. Government is the responsibility of government to recognize and to protect the rights that are given to you by God. And our founders were pretty clear on who God was. We're talking about the biblical God. We're talking about the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments. We're not talking about some other, kind of sky deity. We're not referring to Allah. We're not referring to to some other kind of deity. So that we're clear on where the rights are coming from. What is his character? What's he about? But again, the idea that your rights, our government was founded on the idea that your rights are bestowed upon you. They're inalienable rights bestowed upon you by God. This is natural law. And Tim Kaine says he's just shocked. He says this is some Iranian, kind of notion. Now, he is right. He does seem to understand something about Iran's theocracy. But Mr. Kaine, Senator Kaine, we're not A, a theocracy, and B, we're not a Muslim country. That's not the God we're talking about. So if you're horrified by their laws, it's because you're really horrified by their understanding of who God is, their God. That's not our God. That's not the God who was instrumental and who was looked to in the founding of this country. Now, I mention him because, first of all, it's a case of colossal ignorance from a U.S. senator that he has no idea, it seems, what principles played a role in the founding of our country. He should be the one who is articulating, sir, your rights are not bestowed upon you by those of us sitting here in this chamber. Your rights are given to you by God. It's why, and I'm getting away from the WEF for just a moment because this is critical. It's why all key reform movements in the West appeal to God. They don't appeal to man's law. I mean, what good would the abolitionists have done if they were trying to appeal the law? Because the law of the land said that slavery was legal. That would do you no good. William Wilberforce in Britain did not appeal to existing British or colonial British law. Those laws said that slavery was legal. A modern-day anti-abortion activists do not appeal to law where it says that it's legal. They appeal to God's law that says it's damnable. You see the difference? Same with the civil rights movement. The authentic civil rights movement was appealing to God's laws, saying you're treating us in a way that is not, it may be legal according to man's rules, but it's damnable according to God's rules. In uncertain times, wise investors look for stability. Markets are overinflated, inflation remains a concern, and global tensions continue to rise. That's why many are turning to the safety of physical gold and silver. AlphaOmega Gold is a Christian-owned precious metals company known for honesty, transparency, and biblical stewardship principles. Their team help clients protect their investment with integrity and clear guidance, never pressure. Right now, AlphaOmega Gold is offering a free precious metals navigation guide to explain why owning gold and silver can be a smart, strategic hedge for retirement accounts and long-term security. Don't wait until economic shifts impact your future. So today, go and visit www.ao.gold/IHC or call 855-4AO-GOLD. That's 855-426-4653. Call today to learn how simple it can be to secure what matters most. Now, carry Senator Kane's remarks over to the World Economic Forum because the comments that he made reflect the leftist mindset. They reflect the mindset of the World Economic Forum. The way these kind of people think is that because they don't believe, the World Economic Forum is godless to its black-hearted core. So are its members, at least those people, at the top of the food chain. Maybe you have some very naive people, down at the bottom, and you do, because I've met them, who are idealistic, who don't really seem to understand what the objectives are of the organization to which they belong. But anyway, the World Economic Forum, just like any other secular state that has ever existed, any other fascist or communist state that has ever existed, because they don't believe in God, they obviously don't believe in rights that come from God. They don't believe in natural rights. There's no such thing. And therefore, they believe that you're allowed to do only that which government explicitly states that you can do. That's a very different view from a traditional American view, which says you can do anything that more or less that's not expressly forbidden by the law. That distinction is an important distinction because in one there's tyranny and in the other there's freedom. These are things that the left wants to change. And the World Economic Forum is leftist to its core. And these are people, because they want to be the HOA, the global HOA, the ones who can tell you what you can and can't do. This is the way they think. And this is one of the reasons why, as I've contended on this show, I've often thought that if we were to have a tagline, for this show, I think I would want the tagline to be something like this: pro-human, anti-globalist. We're pro-human, anti-globalist. The World Economic Forum, just like the global left, they are pro-globalist, anti-human. They're pro-globalist, anti-human. And the result of that is, it's why they have there's this kind of pagan element where they're a neo-pagan element where there's a worship of nature. The modern environmentalist movement is invigorated by neo-Marxist ideas and by pagan ideas where there is a kind of worship of nature. You can see this in some of the very strange ceremonies that take place at the World Economic Forum each year in Davos, Switzerland. We'll point some of those out to you perhaps when I'm there again in January. Well, this organization has been going through some disruption in recent years, while at the same time, the organization has been growing. Now, just to do a little recap here for you, the World Economic Forum was founded by Klaus Schwab. I see a lot of people dropping into the comments and saying King Charles was one of the drivers in the founding of the World Economic Forum. He was not. First of all, Charles isn't very bright. Charles doesn't have the ability to, there's nothing in him that has ever given us any indication he's particularly intelligent, much less a visionary. So no. Klaus Schwab was invigorated by the ideas of Henry Kissinger, who was a professor his. And again, I talk about this in other episodes of Ideas Have Consequences in detail. But Schwab was a student of Kissinger's at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. He was also heavily influenced by his own upbringing. I do a full podcast on Klaus Schwab and explain this. And the Club of Rome. And the Club of Rome suggested that there really needed to be some kind of, the Club of Rome was putting out ideas, but they said there needs to be an executive organization that helps to implement them. So Schwab, in 1971, he founded what was first known as the Economic Forum. And it was a place for business men and other what we would now refer to as influencers to gather and to share ideas. Much to Schwab's surprise, the forum just took off. And it did because it was, became a place, and it remains this, it became a place where initially business leaders of major corporations could get together and swap ideas, meet each other, develop plans together, mergers, cut business deals, you name it. Meaning, like so many conferences, if you've ever attended, any kind of corporate conferences, frequently the presentations, that's not even the entree on the plate. That's just the garnish on the plate. The real things that are taking place are usually happening in hotel rooms or in restaurants or in hotel lobbies or coffee shops where people are meeting and and talking, not in a public way. And the World Economic Forum just took off. It just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And soon you had, heads of state. So the last World Economic Forum meeting, you had roughly 50 heads of state, 115 billionaires, 600 CEOs from major corporations, and roughly 2,400 other people there in attendance in Davos, Switzerland. So you can imagine what that looks like. It gives opportunities for heads of state in a less, how shall I put it, public way, without all of the, the pomp and circumstance of heads of states meeting. They can just sort of bump into each other in Davos. Oh, you're attending, I'm attending. What do you know? We just happen to have the opportunity to break away into a hotel room and have a conversation about the war in Ukraine or about trade with China or whatever the issue might be. That's the way it's tended to work. Well, Klaus Schwab has been for 54 years, I think. Isn't that right? Yeah, 54 years. He's been the sole chairman and founder of the World Economic Forum. But what has happened, as I have said to you before, is that Schwab has become something of an embarrassment. I mean, gosh, we've mocked him several times on this show, and I'm hardly, the only one who's been doing that. And again, it's because the guy, he looks like a Bond villain. I don't, as a rule, like to pick on people about the way they look, but it's irresistible with Schwab. He looks like if you're my age or you just happen to be somebody who has watched a lot of Bond films, he looks like the Donald Pleasance, the British actor Donald Pleasance, who played Ernst Stavro Blofeld in I think a couple of Bond movies. Telly Savalas, also bald-headed, playing Ernst Stavro Blofeld in at least one Bond villain. I think maybe only one. He looks like it. And you add to that his German accent, the thick German accent, he just sounds like a villain. And then you put in, some of the strange outfits that he wears and his demeanor of such grandeur and self-importance. It just lends itself to these kinds of comparisons and to the kinds of criticisms that I and other people have made. And I think that they've become a little embarrassed by Schwab, because Schwab at 87 years old, he showed no signs of slowing down, or at least no signs of wanting to step aside from the organization that he created. I mean, he was the ringmaster for 54 years. He enjoyed being the ringmaster. He wanted to continue to do this. This was, if you watched any college football, this is Joe Paterno, not picking up on the fact that maybe it's time to retire. This is Bobby Bowden. Maybe you should retire. It's Bill Belichick, who just got run over by TCU this last week. But anyway, it has the look of that. And the big power brokers behind the scenes at the World Economic Forum, they're ready for him to move on. They wanted to get rid of him. Now, what I'm suggesting to you here is I'm giving you facts. For instance, this is how the World Economic Forum was founded, and here are the people who are behind it, and Klaus Schwab has resigned. But I'm mixing in here now so that you're aware my own speculation as to what has happened here. I think these power brokers wanted him gone because he was an embarrassment and he was impeding their own global ambitions, in part because, not just because Schwab was an embarrassment, but also because I don't think Schwab was ever the guy that commentators, writers have frequently wanted to make him to be, that he was some kind of, modern day Adolf Hitler, or that here was a guy who was, was some kind of, great villain. I think he has been a villain, but for different reasons. I think Klaus Schwab has been more P.T. Barnum than Hitler. I think he's been more Mr. Networker guy than Joseph Goebbels. He, as I read his books, as I've become aware of who he is, I realized that he's a technocrat. He's educated as an engineer, and you can hear it in the statements that he makes. He talks about building this and building that, and he's drawn to technology. And like most WEFers, they're absolutely infatuated with technology. That's what drives them. And they're on the side of the technical sciences, and they give scarce consideration to the social sciences. They are irreligious. They'll have somebody give a lecture on religion, but they don't care. Anthropology, philosophy, history, they seem grossly ignorant of all of these things. And that's what makes them modern day revolutionaries, because they're individuals who are prepared to throw off all received wisdom because they think they're charting what they see as a new course, never really understanding the biblical injunction, Solomon's injunction, that there's nothing new under the sun. Wisdom tells you that. But revolutionaries tend to be the kind of people who think that the direction they're going and forging is completely new, because they have no regard for history. Not really. They may know some of it, so they can drop it into conversations and lectures, but not as a way of informing them about what didn't work and what did work, and how societies function and think, and what the pitfalls might be for the future. They don't think like that. I've sat among them. I can tell you this isn't a part of their DNA. So Schwab, they're wanting to get Schwab out of the way. And so what happens? Schwab finally, under pressure, he announced that he would be stepping down in 2027. He announced last year he would be stepping down in 2027, but that he felt like, so when he's 89, he felt like there would need to be a slow transition. This didn't sit well with the WEF board, who are all powerful people. And the next thing you know, Klaus Schwab is accused of misuse of World Economic Forum funds for, his use of funds that he took from ATMs. I mean, how much money can you get from an ATM? There's usually a limit. Let's just say it's $1,000. I think my own is like $300 that I can get out at any one time. So not big money. He was accused of misuse of WEF funds for personal things, through ATMs. And then secondly, get this, of toxic workplace, hostile workplace environment. Now that's significant. That is significant to me because here is a guy that in my mind, and this all felt very bogus to me, because if you're going to, I'm okay with Klaus Schwab being accused of crimes against humanity. We've essentially accused him of that here on this show, because a theme that is central to what the World Economic Forum is actually about. They hide it among a lot of do-gooder stuff and discussions about things that they really don't care about and really don't believe in. But their central driving idea has been population reduction. Population reduction. Now, I said to you that Henry Kissinger played a very important role in the founding of the World Economic Forum because he was a professor of Klaus Schwab's at the Kennedy School of Government. And he wasn't just a professor, they became pretty tight, the two of them. And Kennedy is the one who authored in 1974 NSSM 200 that has since been declassified. You can find it on the United States government websites. That's National Security Study Memo 200, which was never meant to see the light of day. But in it, Kissinger is writing to Nixon and he's telling him, we have to reduce the global population. We've got to reduce it because the pressure on our own borders, he was definitely not in favor of mass immigration. The pressure on our borders, the pressure in other countries due to overpopulation is something that, and this all grew out of the milieu of the time, the 1968 best-selling book by Paul Ehrlich called the, what was it called? The Population Explosion, the Population Bomb, a best-selling book, again, that I've addressed in other episodes of Ideas Have Consequences. Everyone was kind of consumed at this time with this idea of, now all the predictions that Ehrlich made, not a single one of them came true. He had said that within 10 years, from 1967 by 1978, that there would be mass global starvation that would result in, something like a third of the global population dying from starvation. That never happened. He predicted a number of other things related to that, none of which came true. So he would make, some modest, edits in his book and changes as he went along. But nonetheless, in the late 60s and 70s and into the early 80s, this obsession with population became a very big thing. And that's why the World Economic Forum was founded, was to address this idea in particular. And it's why another issue that we talk about this show a good bit, and a target of mine, and the reason I was swatted, undoubtedly, supposed to have a meeting with the FBI soon, so we'll find out a little bit more. USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. Guess what they're doing? They were going around doing forced sterilizations all over the world. That's supposed to be, the governmental equivalent of Samaritan's Purse. That's what they were doing. So you can see why the left was so upset by the destruction of USAID, which I like to think, and did, play a role in bringing down. I didn't do it alone, but I was like one of those little tiny people running around those giant tusked elephants in the Lord of the Rings movie, and where we're lassoing, the feet so that thing falls and we can kill it. I mean, that's what USAID was. It was this behemoth that many of us were attacking in order to bring it down. And by the way, I'm convinced that elements of it are still operational, but that's a separate conversation. So this is what Schwab was about. This is what the World Economic Forum is about. Schwab's old. Starting to talk about how he deserved a Nobel Peace Prize, standing up in front of the forum with his German accent and shaking his fist exactly like Adolf Hitler in saying, "The future is built by us." There's the language of the engineer for you right there. And I think the board just started going, he's become an embarrassment. We need to move him along and get on to other things. Schwab resisted. Suddenly, Schwab is accused of these crimes. And I lay special emphasis on the two major things, the misuse of funds from ATMs and toxic or hostile workplace environment, because they're so petty. Really? Guy's been there for 54 years, been running the organization, and you're thinking the guy has access to the billions. Do you really think no, they don't believe that, but it was something they could make public and go after him about. And the toxic or hostile workplace environment accusation, again, for me, is totally bogus. It is a new category of corporate sin. It's a corporate version of disorderly conduct. Who defines what disorderly conduct is? I mean, public drunkenness. Now, there's an actual charge. We can actually give a breathalyzer and know whether that's true or not. But disorderly conduct is sort of a catch-all. It could be anything, and it's what the police officer himself decides. If he just finds you annoying, he's like a monitor on YouTube. He can ban you and just say it's disorderly conduct. See, hostile workplace environment, for those of you who don't know, hostile workplace environment, the left has used this, or toxic workplace environment. The left has used this very effectively to get rid of any number of conservative CEOs or others who are just in the way. You see, toxic or hostile workplace environment is the kind of corporate sin that has been used to get rid of any number of conservative or other CEOs or people in power, just to get them out of the way. And it's a convenient weapon, a legal weapon, because you can use it against anybody. You could use it against Donald Trump. You could use it against the CEO of Coca-Cola. You could use it against the school principal. And that's because you can always find, and they do, you can always find a disgruntled employee, a former employee, a fired employee, or a rival who is prepared to assist you in constructing your toxic, hostile workplace environment narrative. They will assist you in doing it because, of course, they don't like the guy in charge. Could you find somebody in the Trump White House who would say that he's guilty of a toxic workplace environment? 100%. Of course you could. Not just that, but sometimes there are people who want media and press themselves. They want to become the darling. They want to get their own interviews and up their own social media game. So in the case of Klaus Schwab, and by the way, if I sound sympathetic here to Klaus Schwab here, I can almost feel sorry for him. Again, I want him to be charged with crimes against humanity, not this. Not this. This is petty nonsense right here. It was so obvious what they were doing. They were trying to get him out of the way. All of them are guilty of crimes against humanity, but they needed him out of the way, so they go and find former employees. So what does Schwab do? Schwab sues the board, I think, for defamation of character. I'm not sure, but he definitely was going after former employees for defamation of character. And what I predicted to you would happen would be that eventually these charges against Schwab would be dropped when he resigned and agreed to accept a golden parachute and ride off into the distance while they clap and say, thank you for your service, put a plaque on the wall, name a center after him, the Klaus Schwab Global Center for Globalist Ambitious Bullshit. That, I promise you that's coming. They're going to name some buildings after him, or they're going to honor him this next year. Thank you so much, Klaus. Thank you. Everybody, please stand. Thank you to our founder. They needed him out of the way. And the easiest way to do it, when it became clear they couldn't talk him out of it, was to accuse him. of things like this. He resigns, and now this week we're told that the charges against him have been dropped. The board has issued a statement saying, "Oh, we decided there was just some minor indiscretion, some confusion, really not a big deal," and that Schwab will likely drop he's already dropped his lawsuit against the board, and will likely drop his lawsuits against the former employees. The board doesn't care about the former employees. If he wants to sue them into oblivion, they're cool with that. They themselves don't want to be sued. So now that's what's happened. And now the World Economic Forum has announced two interim, we'll see if it becomes permanent, but two interim co-chairmen of the World Economic Forum. And who these people are is really interesting to me and utterly predictable. It's utterly predictable. It's so interesting. Who are they? Andre Hoffman and Larry Fink. Andre Hoffman and Larry Fink. Now, Hoffman, according to one bio, is, quote, Roche Holdings. I think that's the way you pronounced it. It could be Roche. It would be better if it was Roche. It should be Roche. Roche Holdings vice chairman and a Swiss billionaire businessman, environmentalist, and philanthropist, known for his role as vice chairman of Roche Holdings AG and his advocacy for sustainability and nature conversation. Now, we're going to delve into who Hoffman is next week. My guess is that you know nothing about him, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him on the next episode of Ideas Have Consequences. This week, our focus is more on Larry Fink. Who is he? Well, he was born in California in 1952, making him 73 this year. He was educated at UCLA, also got, I think, an MBA, a business degree, a graduate business degree, also at UCLA. He was married in 1974 and has 3 children. Sounds like just your average American story there. He's co-founded BlackRock in 1988. What is BlackRock? It's the 102nd largest company in the world. It's the largest asset manager in the world, managing roughly $11 trillion. So it's not really so much about how much money Larry Fink has personally. His personal assets are estimated at $1.2 billion, which means he's nothing, compared to, say, Elon Musk or Bill Gates. They're in a completely different stratosphere, hundreds of billions of dollars relative to him. It's what he manages. See, that's where his real power is. He can leverage money that's enough to buy up every American billionaire combined, because he's managing $11 trillion in assets. That's more than many countries in the world. And again, as the largest asset manager, in the world. That's who the guy is. Time magazine named him one of the top 100 most influential people in the world. I would have to agree with that. Harvard Business Review calls him, quote, a lifelong Democrat. Now, that tells you something, too, about who he is. I should throw in here at this point that the New York Post called him, and I quote, a MAGA darling. A MAGA darling. I don't know where they get that from, but they build that whole case. If you read the article, they build that case around the fact that Trump has a relationship with Fink, and that Trump, when he became president, he said, you may recall this, Trump had said, look, we gave the Panama Canal back to the Panamanians. Now it's the Chinese who control it and run it. We're taking it back. So he calls up Larry Fink and says, look, I want you guys to buy up some of the ports along the Panama Canal, which they did at Trump's request. Now, I do think that Fink is a clever guy. And Fink hasn't come out, anti-Trump. He's a guy who is navigating a business world and where he's managing assets of so many people. I mean, they own Charles Schwab, for heaven's sake. So if you have investments with Charles Schwab, Larry Fink controls your investments. I mean, theoretically, I don't mean he's the one who's, sitting there and doing the stock trading, but in theory, he could. I mean, they own, BlackRock owns, among many other things, BlackRock owns Charles Schwab. But he's a guy who's has something of the opportunist about him, I think, and who wants to maintain good relations with the president of the United States. And Trump is nothing if not a deal maker. You see, this is a thing that I think that the left, Democrats, maybe they do understand it. They just want to mischaracterize it. But I feel like frequently they don't understand him when it comes to his relations, with Kim Jong-un, or his relationships with Xi, or his relationship with Putin. Trump is a deal maker, and he recognizes that you want to, maintain, if you can, good relations with people. He doesn't see any benefit in just, unless the bridge has been utterly burnt, in just going out and, and criticizing people wholesale, unless, again, they're Democrats and others where the bridge is obviously burnt and where they're individuals who are trying to do him or his family, his legacy, personal harm. Nancy Pelosi, Charles Schumer, guys like this that he's mocking, daily, on X. He doesn't mind doing that. But with these other people, he recognizes, I want to stay in good relations with them to avoid war, to avoid trade wars, to avoid things that might be avoided on behalf of the American people. That's just smart. That is just smart. And that, by the way, that aspect of Trump was revealed in not the latest Trump meeting with Zelensky at the White House, but in another one, where the previous one, where J.D. Vance is sitting there and Co-Chairmen, what's his name, Zelensky is, he's sitting like this, and he's wearing his, his olive drab, not wearing a suit. The latest one, he wore a suit, but he didn't wear one for this. And where you have Zelensky just blasting blasting Putin as, I don't remember, but, dictator or evil or whatever. And then Trump says to him, which was the kind of remark that I suspect is typically made privately, but he made it publicly. He said, look, you keep saying things like that, and it's not useful, because when we try to go get on the phone with Putin, and you've said this publicly, how do you think he's going to respond to that? So what Trump actually thinks concerning some of these people, we don't know, but he sees the wisdom in maintaining, good relations, and hence he has with Larry Fink, and he's made positive remarks about Larry Fink. He said, Larry Fink, made me a lot of money this past year by managing some of my own wealth. Trump sees the benefit of that, and I think Fink, for his own part, sees it as well. But bear in mind, Fink is, quote, a lifelong Democrat. He's not a MAGA darling. I don't care what the New York Post said. He's not a MAGA darling, even if he might do something on behalf of the president of the United States just simply to maintain good relationships with him. He's been a huge proponent of ESG, DEI, sustainability. Did you pick up on that in Andre Hoffman's little bio, the word sustainability, used there? And remember what I've told you about that word, sustainability. Sustainability is the new final solution. The new final solution. The term final solution didn't enter into the Western lexicon until after Nuremberg. And it was because it was a term that the Nazis used among themselves, as William Shire points out in his mammoth and very important work, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. It was really during depositions that the term came up, when they are talking to some of the personnel who worked at the death camps, where they would make reference to the final solution, or to the Jewish question. And the lawyers deposing these people, said, what are you talking about? And then they realized, oh my gosh, they're talking about genocide. So as Shire points out, they created their own language, not just to hide from other people what they were doing, but even to hide from themselves, because something in their own core, I would say it's the law of God that's written upon the heart of every human being, as Romans 2:15 says. They hide it from themselves. And the World Economic Forum does it too. When they're talking sustainability, they're talking fundamentally anti-human policies like population reduction. If they talk about population sustainability, I've sat with them over coffee and heard them use those terms. They talk about population the way, normal people, sports fans might talk about batting averages. And then somewhere you have to go, oh, whoa. Are you actually talking about bumping off, 6 or 7 billion people? Go watch the earlier episodes I've done on the World Economic Forum, where we show you video of World Economic Forum agenda contributor Dennis Meadows saying exactly that. But he says it in such nice terms. He says it in a way that sounds so friendly, so peaceful, to use a word he uses. We want to reduce the global population by 6 to 7 billion people. We hope we can do it peacefully. Wow. That's the way they think. This is the way they think. Again, this is the HOA from hell. It is the HOA literally from hell. This is kind of demonic stuff here. And so they're all about sustainability. And he's also about stakeholder capitalism. Now, what is that? Now, again, we've talked about it before, but according to the World Economic Forum website, stakeholder capitalism is a form of capitalism in which companies seek long-term value creation by taking into account the needs of all their stakeholders and society at large. Now, let me translate that for you. By stakeholders, they mean everyone in society who has a stake in the success of a given company. That's what they mean. So stakeholder capitalism, rather than regular capitalism, real capitalism is about making money. And the reason you try to make money is so you can stay in business, so you can keep employing your employees, so you can continue to serve your customers. And so you can make money either for yourself, if it's privately owned, or for your shareholders. That's the goal. That's the goal. And it's not a wicked goal. But see, these people, influenced by socialism and the fact they've already made their billions. You can talk about things like this when you've made your billions. Now, it's not so much about making money. It's about social responsibility, social justice. That's the way they think. So stakeholder capitalism, the way they define it, is it's about a company being socially responsible to everyone in a given community who has a, quote, stake in the success of that company. Now, who is that? So if you're, say, Cracker Barrel, and by the way, guess who was behind the ESG, DEI, logo, perverse sexual agenda of Cracker Barrel? The wholesale changes that took place there. Guess who one of the largest shareholders in Cracker Barrel is? I'm sure you've guessed. BlackRock. BlackRock. That name, anytime you see sustainability, let's add to that BlackRock. Anytime you see BlackRock, you should be concerned that there's some nefarious activity going on, because they are nefarious. I think BlackRock, along with Google, they're evil. They're evil. I refuse to use any of those products. Knowingly, anyway, I don't use any of them. Tell my staff, don't want you using them. Don't want you using them. Don't want my money going there. Anyway, all of that said, taking Cracker Barrel as an example of stakeholder capital and applying their own definition to it. Again, the WEF's definition, WEF website definition, stakeholder capitalism is a form of capitalism in which companies seek long-term value creation by taking into account the needs of all their stakeholders and society at large. What did that look like? So we have an actual example that we can look at. Cracker Barrel. That was BlackRock and Larry Fink behind all that. They pushed it, even when their own shareholders were saying to them, don't do this. This will be an economic disaster. It is estimated that Cracker Barrel has lost $350 million in this. Do I think Larry Fink and BlackRock knew that was going to happen? I do. I think that the goal here was the destruction of an American institution that smacked of Americana, and particularly of the southern United States. They wanted to get rid of it because of what it represented. It represented, wholesome Christian Americana. It played on all of that, and they hated it, and they wanted to get rid of it. So what did they do? They went and hired their DEI hire, their CEO. She absolutely smacks of all of this. And she came in with her plan to change everything. So it started looking like a Denny's and altering the menu. And see, the part that no one seems to be paying attention here is everyone was thrilled. Oh, we've put so much pressure on them that now they've gone back to their old logo. Who cares? The real issue here is that for years now, Cracker Barrel has been giving millions and millions of dollars to a sordid sexual agenda. And that was being done in a way that most of their customers had no idea they were doing it. And until you change that, you've changed really nothing. It's quite literally just a window dressing change. They changed the logo. We're back. We've gone back to the way that we were before. No, you didn't. You're still giving your money to all of these evil causes. That's what you're doing. And that's a real thing that needs to be changed. There needs to be continued pressure on Cracker Barrel until that changes. But how does this definition apply? This definition of stakeholder capitalism, how does it apply to Cracker Barrel? I mean, it says here that they're creating long-term value. They didn't do that, not monetarily. And taking into account the needs of all of their stakeholders in society at large. How do they do that? Well, I think if I had a conversation with the CEO of Cracker Barrel, love to have you on, by the way. Sure, that won't happen, but I'd love to have you on. Or Larry Fink, love to have you on. I think the answer they would give is, you're misunderstanding, Larry, what we mean by the needs. And remember, that's a key word here. The needs of the stakeholders and the needs of society at large. They would say, I think, we were meeting their needs. They just didn't know what their needs were. You see how condescending this is? The World Economic Forum as the HOA from hell. The World Economic Forum is contemptuous of democracy, of representative democracy, of republics. They're utterly contemptuous of the will of the people. And that's because they are, to go back to our term earlier, they're elitists. They believe that they have, not by divine right, because they don't believe in the divine, but via some kind of maybe superior genetics or a cosmic quirk, that they have the right and the responsibility to govern you. So the key word here, in addition to sustainability, the key word here is needs. Word here is needs, not wants, not the desires of a given community, but the needs of community. And who determines that? They do. This is the way Larry Fink and BlackRock, those people think. And what they did to Cracker Barrel is what they want to do to the whole world. And they want to do it that way, not because of what you want. Stakeholder capitalism is completely, utterly dismissive of what you would desire. They would like to speak in terms of what you need, and they will determine what you need. It's like this is this nanny state, kind of philosophy that's going on here. And what you vote for and what you desire, what you want on the food menu and what you want in the general store and what you want the store to look like and what you want when you sit down in a Cracker Barrel, they go, we don't care. It's what we think you need. And what we think you need is you need some LGBTQ people in there serving you. You need to see the rainbow on your menu and on the little table tent. You need to see DEI at work, where we've hired a general manager of the store, not on the basis of their ability to actually run it or even their job performance, but on the basis of their skin color or their sexual orientation, or maybe the fact that they're an illegal immigrant or whatever it might be. That's the way these people think. So I want you to bear in mind Cracker Barrel, because what BlackRock did to Cracker Barrel isn't because they're stupid about managing money. They aren't. Again, they're worth 11 trillion. They're managing 11 trillion. This was bully ball. This was them coming in and saying, we can do this to Cracker Barrel because we want to do it to Cracker Barrel and because we don't care. So stakeholder capitalism actually isn't capitalism at all. They don't care what the stockholders want. They're not interested in what the community wants or what the employees want or what the customers want. It's about the needs that they have predetermined you should have. And I promise you, those needs are all radically leftist. They're all radically leftist. Now, this is what, by the way, the Heritage Foundation, and I think they're right in calling it this, they call it woke capitalism. And if I had any quibble here, it would be to say that it's actually not capitalism at all. We might call it something like woke economics, because it's not actually economics. Now, we are seeing a rebellion against what Heritage Foundation calls woke economics, against ESG, against DEI, against these kinds of measures. And of course, who has become, the woman who has almost become a kind of William Wallace figure leading a populist movement against this? Sydney Sweeney. Sydney Sweeney has been blessed with a tremendous opportunity. And I know what you were thinking I was going to say there. Shame on you. You thought I was going to say she was blessed with something else. But Sydney Sweeney, she has been blessed with a tremendous opportunity, because guess what happened? American Eagle decided, look, our company is losing money. We've been doing all this DEI and ESG stuff, and our stockholders aren't happy, and we're going to cease to exist as an organization. We need someone to pull the fat out of the fire. So they go and hire Sydney Sweeney, an actress. I don't know if she's a model or not, probably. And they go and hire her, and they do a commercial that is Americana straight through. This was very mild stuff. It is a woman looking under the hood of the car, and perhaps we can put those images up while I'm speaking here. A woman, Sydney Sweeney, looking under the hood of the car. And by the way, I love the car, this old Mustang. And she puts it down, and then you see her saunter off in her, her baggy jeans, and she gets into the car and she spins off, and away she goes. And the commercial says, Sydney Sweeney has great jeans. American Eagle sells jeans. And then the left went bonkers over this, and they called it racist and all this crap. And it's because they just didn't like the fact that it was American Eagle saying, we are embracing Americana, femininity, beautiful, appealing femininity. We didn't just have, Lizzo or some fat, representative there. And we're embracing capitalism because we want to make money. And American Eagle stock went. But you see, if BlackRock owned American Eagle, this is not what would have happened. And I'm relating this to you because I want you to understand Larry Fink is the guy behind it. He's the guy behind it because he's the CEO of BlackRock. What happened at Cracker Barrel is exactly what is happening in Western nations all over the world. It's what's happening in the suppression of free speech all over the world, but particularly in Britain. It's what's happening with open borders. It's what's happening with rigged elections. It's what's happening with corruption. It's what's happening with, coercive strategies and tactics. It's what's happening when countries decide we don't care what our constituents want. We will give you what we think you need. That's BlackRock's DNA. That's who they are. So I think it's very notable that Larry Fink is now the interim. Will he remain will he be the long-term actual chairman? Will Andre Hoffman be the long-term chairman? Will the two of them of the World Economic Forum? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But bear in mind, these guys have a history of making war on their customers. They have a history of making war on whole populations because they can and because they don't care. Something else that fascinates me here. As I've said to you before, just go and search for yourself. You will now find some negative things about Klaus Schwab because they wanted him out and because you'll see all these charges, mentioned, regarding Klaus Schwab. But if you go to the WEF's Klaus Schwab page, which I'm going to guess is still up, I'm not sure. But if you went there, what you would find is merely just a list of degrees, honors, books, and so forth. Wikipedia, which loves to indulge negativity of every kind, particularly against conservatives, and which is a kind of rumor mill, is pretty mum on Klaus Schwab. I mean, in a way that I found shocking when I was researching Klaus Schwab. His entry is roughly 1,800 words, maybe more now, because I'm sure a section has been added about his resignation and the recent controversy. But the point is, it's quite small and almost devoid, until recently, of anything negative regarding him. How does that happen with a guy with global ambitions who meets with heads of state and expects to be treated like one? How does that happen? The same is also true of Larry Fink. I went to his Wikipedia page a couple of days ago, copied and pasted it into a Word document, and then did a word count. His entry is 1,400 words. Andre Hoffman's is a mere 571 words. How does that happen? What I'm getting at here is it tells us something about these men. And I don't indulge conspiracy theories here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just simply telling you the fact speaks for themselves in this. These biographies appear to be very, very carefully curated and guarded by an army of monitors. And guys like this have the ability to do it. If you're a public figure like myself or other people, and you have a Wikipedia page, and people go on there, it's why Elon Musk is warned about Wikipedia, that it's leftist. That's why it's also so weird that his grok uses Wikipedia. I mean, come on, Elon. But it's why Elon Musk is warned about Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is not a source of factual information. As I said to you, I think last week, my students, if you cite Wikipedia, or I know you've used it, you get an F. You get an F, because it tells me you're lazy and you don't know how to do actual research. Use books, people. Go to libraries and use credible ones. You'll learn how to do it. It takes time, but you will learn how to do it. For some people, it's a skill they never learned, or they're having to relearn because they just don't use books anymore. Acquire books. Build up your physical library. You're going to wish you did, because time's going to come where you won't be able to find factual information online that's useful to you, because it'll be totally controlled by artificial intelligence with a lefty bent. That is the direction that we are rapidly going in. You don't become the head of an $11 trillion organization, business, and not have a few enemies who want to go on your Wikipedia page and say some negative things about you. How in the world does Larry Fink? Well, because he has monitors. How is it that Andre Hoffman, who is, I think, 5th generation, family-owned pharmaceutical company making COVID vaccines, have only an entry on Wikipedia of 71 words? Because they control it. That's how. And it's why when you research these guys, you can find almost nothing. So we have to read tea leaves here. And the way we do is we look at their actions. What is it that they're doing? What boards are they on? What positions are they taking? And what are their companies doing? Well, as we've seen here, it's quite obvious what BlackRock does. Nothing good that I can see. Nothing good that I can see. Are these guys evil? I think so, but not perhaps in the way that you might suppose. I know I've compared them to Klaus Schwab, to a Bond villain, but generally speaking, I don't think you should think of them as Bond villains. That is to say, guys who are evil and they know it, who are out to, destroy the world. That's not who they are. At their core, these people are godless ideologues. That is to say, they worship ideas. Ideologues are people, we call them ideologues because they're idiots. They are people for whom ideas matter more than people. Back when I was debating Christopher Hitchens, this was one of the things that I began to pick up on with Hitchens, because we'd done debates with a number of very prominent atheists. And I could sense that while Richard Dawkins was an ideologue, I think he's become less of one these days, but while Richard Dawkins was an ideologue, Hitchens had been, but was rapidly moving away from that. He was backtracking. And I think it was because he was now in the company of other ideologues, and he was seeing in them something that unsettled him. And it was for that reason that I would have a conversation with, say, Peter Singer, Princeton bioethicist. And I was having coffee, with Peter Singer, having lunch with him in Melbourne, Australia, and in his, which is his hometown, and his other hometown is Princeton, New Jersey. And where it was quite evident with Peter that Peter was willing to follow his atheism all the way to its logical conclusions, which is to say that human beings are just an accident in space and time. They're just a chemical accident, and that they have no actual transcendent meaning, hence his utilitarianism. You have to create meaning, because there isn't any transcendent meaning. There's no God to judge you in the next life for your actions in this one. It's why Peter Singer would say that killing a human being is no different than killing an animal. Neither one of them has intrinsic value. Hitchens wasn't prepared to go there, which I found fascinating. And I would point out to him, and did in an interview, that's inconsistent with your atheistic views. And he would admit that that was true, but also that it didn't sit well with him to compare a human baby to a piglet the way Singer did and does. These guys, these WEFers, they're ideologues, you see. Their ideas matter more to them than people do. And ideologues are extremely dangerous people. They're extremely dangerous people. I've asked the question, are they evil? And I said, yes, they are, but not the way you might think of them as evil. And it's because they think that what they're doing is good. They think that what they're doing is good. C.S. Lewis said this. It's a brilliant observation on his part. He said, of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. May be the most oppressive. Again, it's the HOA. They're doing it for you. It's for you. It's about the collective, not the individual. Individual liberties are irrelevant to an HOA. Individual liberties are irrelevant to the World Economic Forum. Individual liberties are irrelevant to leftists because they wake up, hit the coffee maker, and think about your day. What are you doing? That's the way these people think. Here's a quotation that is attributed to Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I love Solzhenitsyn. I've read loads of Solzhenitsyn, and I don't recall ever reading this, but I haven't read everything that Solzhenitsyn said, so I don't know if he actually said it or not. I want you to be aware of that. But whoever said it, it's a good observation. It holds true. I suspect, by the way, that he said the first part, the first sentence, and that somebody else added the second part, but I don't know it. So maybe one of you can ferret this out for me and let me know, because my researchers at present are unavailable. To do evil, a human being must first of all believe that what he's doing is good. Ideology, that is what gives devil doing its long-sought justification and gives the evildoer the necessary steadfastness and determination. That is the social theory which helps to make his acts seem good instead of bad in his own and others' eyes, so that he won't hear reproaches and curses, but will receive praise and honor. You sell it to a public as good. Most frequently, it's for your safety. It's for your moral good. It's for the protection, the good of the community. That's the way often evil is sold to people. Very seldom do evildoers recognize their evil and publicly position it as evil. You know, that's the joker. Most of the time, they try to sell it to you as good. It's for you. You see, I'm quite certain that the CEO and others, BlackRock, there's no repentance here for what they did with Cracker Barrel. They backed off because they were under huge public pressure. That's all they did. Was there a change of heart? Was there a recognition that we lost our shareholders, not our stakeholders, our shareholders, hundreds of millions of dollars? They don't care. They're totally unrepentant. I'm sure of it. Why? Because they believe that they were meeting the needs of their stakeholders, whether their stakeholders thought them to be needs or not, whether their stakeholders believed in them or wanted them or not. These are people who are convinced. They're absolutely possessed, demonically possessed of self-righteousness, And I'll end on this thought. It is my own. Something that dawned on me a few years ago. And I feel like it was after reading some scripture, after some prayer, and thinking on some of the things that the thoughts that I was prompted to have from my own Bible reading. I was just talking about in an episode of WTF with Lawrence Fox, the need for boredom. It's okay to have boredom from time to time because it produces sometimes a positive activity and it makes you think. You know, when we're constantly being bombarded with stimuli, things from the outside, often you're never alone with your own thoughts. And on this particular occasion, I was on my tractor and I was thinking through this whole issue of self-righteousness, because I've witnessed it in so many people. I've witnessed it in myself. I think the human condition is one of self-righteousness. We often think of self-righteousness. We often think of legalism as a product of religious people, specifically Christians. You know, the Saturday Night Live, church lady. That it's Christians who are self-righteous, who are legalistic. Not at all. Self-righteousness is a product of the human heart. Legalism is a product of the human heart. You don't need to be particularly religious, and it's because it's the way whereby we judge ourselves as righteous is some particular way. Some of the most self-righteous people I've ever met are adherents to secular ideologies, like say COVID vaccines. Did you ever run into the mask Nazis? Recycling. Did you ever run into have you ever run into recycling Nazis? Environmentalists are utterly full of their own self-righteousness. And this was the thought that came to me. It dawned on me that there's not a single sin, it dawned on me there's not a sin in hell that won't also be reflected in heaven. That is to say, for every person who has committed bribery or embezzlement or adultery or murder, there will be someone in heaven who's done that as well. With the exception of one sin. And that's self-righteousness. That sin won't be represented in heaven. And that's because a self-righteous man will never grant you forgiveness because he's sure you don't deserve it. And he will never ask for it because he's sure he doesn't need it. Meaning there will be people in heaven like myself who have been, guilty, all of us, of self-righteousness at some point of your life. But if you're going to heaven, you've repented of it. What you have in hell are people who do not repent. And they don't repent because they are full of their own self-righteousness. That's these people. That's them. They're possessed of their self-righteousness. They are sure they are better than you. And they're sure that they know what you need. This has been another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton.